I do. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear too, with, whenever you're ready to start, what it is that you're looking for, and that way I can try and aim my answers at
Right.
what you're trying to.
Want something jumping over those chairs? Well, thank you so much for meeting with us today. We really appreciate your response and like being so speedy at
yeah, really.
being able to do what we do.
It's an important topic, and I'm happy to chat about it.
Yeah, thank you. We first wanted to know sort of like how you got here and where you went to undergrad.
Mhm. Yeah, so I started at UNLV in Las Vegas, and met my wife. We moved to Oregon because she's from Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished up at Western. I was editor of the paper, just kind of randomly. I was a political science major. Got a really lucky job working for Governor Kitzhaber the first time around in his budget shop, and got tasked with explaining to a local right-wing radio host's audience whenever he would say something that was wrong, which was relatively frequently. The senior analysts didn't really want to be bothered with having to respond, so they would have me do it, and I got good at it. And then I did like a big budget presentation to the incoming governor teams, and just found out that I really liked doing this. So I went on to do financial investigations and stuff for the state, and then was a spokesperson at ODOT. So during the last Snowmageddon, or what was it, the Arctic Blast #1, and when like Vernonia was underwater, I was the public information person, so the person who was telling television crews what was going on, and going on television and saying, don't drive, it's snowy, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just saw the job apply, and I thought that'd be very cool. It was, I had to take a little bit of a pay cut to leave state government, come here, but it's been totally worth it. I really loved it.
Nice. So
Yeah.
what does that sort of job description include?
So my title right now is Director of Media Relations. There's no, I saw it in the consent form, there's no Media Relations Department. It's just me. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. The functions are pretty broadly distributed, which is kind of a key thing to understand. So my office is the Office of University Communications, which was formerly the Office of Marketing Communications. It's existed organizationally in a few different places over the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So my job description is to work with the media on things, everything from news releases to reporter questions. Like today, the Oregonian wanted to talk about the value of law school. When other folks aren't around, I'll answer the questions on behalf of law school. So anything like that, I deal with it. I write, I do social media for the university, do communication planning, work on the publications. We're a really small team, so everything from a critical letter to our mission materials to this, all that kind of thing, some community relations related things, helping promote events and stuff.
Okay, so what sort of factors go into choosing images for these promotional materials that are being sent out to students that you're wanting to come to Willamette?
Yeah, so one thing to note there is that there's a whole bunch of different materials. So there's print, there's email, there's website, there's social media, and even the website is a really big thing. There's no monolithic.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different sections that are maintained by different people, and that kind of. There's third parties that do emailing on our behalf. So what goes into a photo we pick? It depends a lot on the objective, the message, the audience. One thing that I wanted to make sure to just bring out is that depending on how you are defining diversity, right? We have to consider a broad range of diversity. So at the institutional level, that could be the school, whether it's AGSM or CLA. It could be class, freshman, sophomore. It could be ethnicity, gender, major, geographic origin, all of these things. There's many more, right? So it really depends on the individual communication, what the photo looks like. But generally speaking, we like the photos to reinforce the message of the communication, show our people in our community, and often faculty-student interaction. I'd say there's that the representation of Willamette is more of an emergent property of many communications than any one sort of construction. We're redesigning our website, and I really am pushing that the updated website has dedicated sections similar to Chapman's, where the representation is much more influenced by student blogs, voices, that, so if you go to Chapman's website, that's really what I'm hoping you can get out of it. And more than that too, what fits on the page? What's a good picture? What our photographer can shoot? If you take each of these dimensions of diversity and you say, well, we must have this factor, this factor, this factor, this factor, and this factor, and there's 3 people. As you saw when you were trying to schedule these interviews, sometimes you can very quickly get to the point where you just can't accomplish that in a reasonable time frame. So the ability to capture the images is another big one.
So the next question we had for you might be a little bit redundant.
Sure.
I feel like you did touch on this, but we were just wondering what kind of image best represents Willamette.
That's a really tough one. I don't know if there is one kind of image. I mean, the single best possible image would be a very diverse, in that broad sense I was talking about, a group of people working together with faculty members on some kind of collaborative research at Xena Forest. You know what I mean? Yeah, we are a really broad community, so it's pretty tough to reduce it down to one particular thing. I'm not trying to dodge if there's something.
No. Something to extrapolate on that. We were interested in well, 2 ways, like relationship between how Willamette's staff are choosing which professors are featured, and then also how I know that when we come to Willamette, we sign a form, right? That just that gives permission for Willamette to use our photos, and if that's true for the professors as well, whether professors are signing something to be on here, and which professors you're choosing to select.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I don't. To be honest with you, if anyone had objected, we would just take their image down.
Mm-hmm.
So on a practical level, it's that simple, which has really only happened a handful of times over the years, and usually there's some kind of extenuating circumstances. I'm sorry, say the second part of that question?
Are they signing a form in order to, when they initially are hired at Willamette?
I honestly don't know what the faculty contract is like,
Okay.
but generally, how do we choose faculty? We have a lot of people approach us, and it's a small place, we get to know everybody. The most intentional grouping of faculty that I could think of for anything we've done was with colleges that change lives.
Mm-hmm.
And diversity among all of those different aspects, those different factors, those different dimensions, was one of the ways that we picked these professors. So if you were to walk around and ask people, I think generally, what do you like about Willamette? What is it that you feel is distinctive? You probably will get 8 out of 10 students. Well, how about this? What do you think is distinctive about Willamette? Just say it. Honestly, no trick. What do you think?
I think you're probably for the small class sizes, and because it was in Oregon and I wanted to stay in Oregon.
Okay, that's a common answer.
Relationship, relationships with professors,
Exactly, community of some sort, right? It's almost always the answer. So I looked for professors that really exemplified that worked really closely with students. So, and then I had to pick a diversity of people. So I picked I asked and they said yes, which was really the key, right? To have those great people who are willing and able to help you. But at the time, it was a rhetoric professor that she's no longer here, but she was fantastic. And anyway, right, Amber Davison, and she taught using Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Family Guy, and she did a talk that I used to host a pub talk series for Willamette. She did one of them for me, and had her dog in the office, and it was in Fort Hall, so you get to see like this one part of campus, and then had the Ricardo de Mambro Santos talk to another person, right? If you couldn't find a more charming representative of Willamette in all of your life, I don't know who it would be, but had just worked with students on rediscovered artwork from Italy, and students who played this real key part and allowed us to talk about the museum and all the other that sort of thing. Joe Bowersocks, and he brought this writer out to Xena so that she could go see everything that was going on at Xena and talk about that, which is sort of a distinctive thing. Being distinctive is another part of what in marketing you're generally trying to do. And then lastly, Emma Coddington, so a science professor. So as best as I could, there were 2 males, 2 females. Luckily, I mean, just really fortuitously, 2 people that had international experience or that were international in origin, 2 younger people, 2 older people, science, art, so as best as you could possibly get it, and still, be folks who can share distinct things about Willamette and represent what as best as I could see we went about it. But the majority of the time, it's more mundane than that. It's here's our message. Do we have some recent imagery, or can before this thing comes out, if we have the opportunity, can we go shoot photos with Dave Craig's group that's doing biology research at the river or something? So we basically we look for opportunity to show diversity as much as possible, but it's in a lot of different dimensions, and that's really, I think, the hard part. And I'm curious how you're going to quantify this, because that's something that's very difficult.
Or I'm wondering, is the same true for like choosing students? I guess I'm thinking specifically, I happened to run across I think it's, but I might be wrong, the admin students page, there's like the We Are Willamette or Why Willamette video, like how students are chosen for that, like those types of videos?
Yeah, generally for those kinds of videos, we'll either know somebody or we'll just ask the people in admissions who may know people, who are some good students that are really involved and like to talk about Willamette. I think Stephen Yamada was in the last one because he worked in the office and we could get a hold of him really easily, and he was really active on campus. You'll probably see his face on a lot of photos partly because he was active, and partly because we could say, hey Stephen, we need a photo, can you take a photo? Can you take a photo?
Cool. And then I guess I'm really interested in this like idea of like multiple types of diversity. Can you speak more about that at all? And like
Sure. So there's diversity of our programs. We do our best to represent programs as equitably as possible, but there's a lot. I mean, again, we have at this moment there's me and 1.4 writers, 1.4 FTE writers centrally. There's a lot of distributed communications functions. So the central management of this as a concept it's not as strong as it is in some places. Like I worked at ODOT, there was a director's office that communicated, and so there was a lot more singular voice. There's culturally and organizationally we're distributed. So there's the programs, sciences, humanities. There's looking at programs by how many people are in them, by their need, right? Music, theater, these are visual, audible, event-driven things. We need to help them. Museums, same kind of thing. Athletics, there's athletes, intramurals, activities. Those are all parts of what we look at. We look at events. We look at different kinds of clubs. What are the things that we do that show the distinctive character of us? So, the activities with Shamawa Indian School is something that we highlight because it shows that our community does a tremendous amount of service, and we talk about the museum and its Native American collection, because that's another unique, distinctive thing. We'll talk about politics because we're across the street from the Capitol and we want to highlight how that's used. So yeah, the geographic origin, we definitely want to make sure that as part of media relations, we want to be able to tell a story about someone and send it to their hometown so that their hometown paper will run it and the person will get some kudos and Willamette will be in the local paper. There's so many that there is a lot. And yes, definitely we take into account gender. So we'll try to not have a whole slew of stories in a row that's of any one of these dimensions. We don't want to have, if we can help it, stories about 5 women in a row in the same way we wouldn't want to have stories about 5 science stories in a row if we could help it. But if, for example, I remember this from last year because we frequently hear from folks about, my program maybe isn't being seen or heard as much, or why am I reading about the same type of person? I feel really bad that I'm blanking on her name. When our soccer player, biology, chemistry student, oh my gosh, I see her face clear as day. Anyway, when she was named Academic All-American, we had just had several stories about women in a row, and I wasn't not going to run the story about the student's fantastic accomplishment, that she's an Academic All-American and she's got a 3.93 and led the Northwest Conference in scoring and all. So Stephanie Scaling. So sometimes just the timeliness factors will say, you know what, this is a critical thing, we've got to do this, and yeah, we won't be able, we might have 2 or 3 science things in a row if they do something fantastic, or if 3 of our English professors come out with books in a row, as just happened, then we'll tell the story as it is.
I have a question from before, and this can tie to both students and faculty, but you mentioned that a handful of people have asked to have their photos taken down, and I was wondering what some of the motivations behind those would be. Has it been students as well? I don't want to put words in.
I can't immediately think of a student who's asked to have their picture taken down. The faculty members, I don't think there were any commonalities. I think one person just didn't want his picture on the web. Yeah, I don't know. I can only think of 2 off the top of my head. I don't know why one of them wanted it down.
You just received a, I want to take it down and not a why.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I prefer if you take my photo off the web. Done.
I don't know if you can answer this, but is it when professors are still at Willamette or after they've left Willamette?
At.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's rare. It's there's a few hundred professors, and totally understandable if someone doesn't want their image online.
Another question that goes back to this question of understanding of diversity at Willamette, or the way that it's defined. We were looking at the website, and there is on the admissions page, the diversity at WU, and then it talks about multicultural, but it's never really defined, and I was wondering how Willamette's defining that and whether it's using a definition, because it's not just Willamette, right? It's on different stats things, multicultural students, but that's never really defined as what that means, and I'm wondering if the students themselves are defining them that way, or if it's sort of larger definition that we're all using.
Yeah, how do you define diversity was actually my first question for you.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I got a good sense from what we were talking about. I think generally when people are referring to that stat, there's federally reported data. It's IPED, and I don't recall what the acronym stands for, but if you just Google Willamette Common Data Set, you'll find ours. And there's a category in there that I can actually give you the language if you'd like, but that's generally what it's referring to, and it's self-reported data.
Oh,
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to keep chatting. I'll just find it and give you the exact
Yeah.
The party got really soft in this round. new students?
Yes, yeah.
On it, sorry, I don't actually have it with me, but underneath the section for the multicultural students, there was
On the website?
on
No, on the We Are Willamette.
like packet.
The prospective student.
Packet.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was, it said that there was 36% multicultural students, and underneath it, there was a list of like self-identifying, but I thought that the self-identified remark was only made towards the various like different racial groups.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, never mind. Since I don't have it with me, I won't ask you to explain it.
But, so, generally speaking, it's under enrollment and persistence, and the way that they ask says, I think, so this is the way it's broken down when people are asked, right? Non-resident aliens, Hispanic, Black or African American, non-Hispanic, white, non-Hispanic. Why don't you just go look, because it's probably better for you to do that. But
That's the Willamette data set.
yeah, and every college it's a federally required data set, so you can compare against any other college.
Yeah.
How are those even made? Like, is it like since it's federal, they ask Willamette to give them the data and then or do they collect it themselves?
Yeah, each college is required to collect it. I believe this is at enrollment that everyone fills this out.
Oh, okay.
So, and then we provide it.
Okay. Cool. Folks have other questions? Do you have any more questions for us?
No, I mean, I'd love to know whatever you come up with, and if you have suggestions, I'm happy to, take a look at them. And if there's a way that we can make it better, we would love to. Keep in mind, there's, the website is big, so there are sections of it that are old, and we're right now going through starting out with a web redesign company. So.
What's the company?
The company itself is called Barkley REI. They do a lot of websites. So 3 recent examples that they did were Chapman, Champlain, and Davidson. And I think if you look those sites up and you look at what our site looks like now, you'll probably be pleased when you see, especially I think their Chapman site is really cool, and it does the most fantastic job of integrating students and student voices. But if you have questions as you go out there, because again, my shop maintains a really narrow section of stuff. I can find the folks who maintain whatever it is you're looking for. Admissions staff generally maintains the admissions section, and so my staff generally does the stories that you'd find on the front page. We call it the flipper, like the rotating story log, and then the highlights in the news. And we'll contribute to the print periodical, the print publications that are done as well.
So your day-to-day job looks like something involving one of those?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, although today, there's many days because of the media aspect of it where I'm tracking down something for a member of the media, or there's not that typical days, which is cool. I like it.
Yeah. So one last question.
Sure.
The admissions keeps up the admissions page. That's correct.
Section, yeah.
Section. Would Frank Miller still be the person taking the photos for that page?
Probably. But yes. For the most part, there definitely are other photos that people have taken that are on the web in places, but chances are it's Frank.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular? I would think that probably for most of those pages, the content is more determined by what that section is supposed to say. So
yeah,
they're mostly headshots, aren't they?
Yeah, we're trying to get a hold of Frank as well, so hopefully we'll be able to ask him any of our questions.
I don't know I don't know what Frank's availability or schedule looks like. I mean, he's going to feel comfortable talking about it, just mostly from the perspective of what is, I don't know, what you would want Frank to weigh in on. I mean, is there anything that?
Just kind of the process that goes into like what he's told to go photograph, or like what direction he's supposed to be taking. Like.
Oh, I can tell you
Okay.
that. Yeah, usually because most of those you'll see are headshots. It's, hey, Frank, can you take a photo of this person, and then he'll talk to that person, and they'll find somewhere scenic. If it's a nice day, they'll go outside. If it's not, they'll find a place where the backdrop looks like Willamette. Otherwise, Frank walks around on nice days and takes photos. That the general ongoing, the thing I ask Frank to do is do your best to find photos of people interacting, and especially if you can walk through the Hearts or walk over to Science or through Ford or anywhere and find people, faculty working with students, or students enjoying campus life. And there's a strategic reason, actually. It's a good thing to bring up. We also get data from a couple different sources. There's a freshman survey that I don't know if you remember taking. It's a longer survey about, I could get it to you, actually. I can give you that. But it's a longer survey, so we find out what people's attitudes are across a whole spectrum of things. A lot of other colleges do the same kind of survey, so what it does is it lets us really gauge what our students think versus other students. That data showed that our students felt like we had a really active campus life. We get data from students, we used to get data from students who didn't choose Willamette, and a lot of those folks said that they didn't perceive Willamette had a good campus life. So in this case, we have, our students really do think we have a good campus life. We feel like we have a pretty good campus life. There's hundreds of student, 100 student organizations and a lot of student-led activities, lots of things going on as far as campus life. And yet our prospective students don't see it. So in the last year, I've asked Frank a lot, please shoot campus life. Go out, if there's people playing ultimate frisbee or slacklining or whatever people are doing, go shoot that. So you'll see if you look on our Facebook page over the last year, a lot more of campus beauty, campus life. We created an admissions piece over the last year that's Salem, Your New Home, and it's a kind of a fold-out mappy thing. Yeah, driven by that. The virtual tour, which is a relatively new thing, you'll see that that exists at the level of campus, at the level of the city, and then the level of the region, so that people could see, here's all the things I could do right around Salem, here's all the things, right on campus, here's all the stuff around Salem, here's the Northwest. So in the last year, that's been kind of Frank's second mission, is to go find people having enjoying campus life, and to show that more.
And is there any other direction, just a free range going?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's actually on a lot of projects. So like those video projects, they take a long time. Like video takes forever to produce. So Frank will shoot video. As you found when you're trying to arrange interviews, it's very difficult to find everybody and track them down in their schedule. So he's doing a lot, probably 10 different things at the same time, trying to arrange all these photos, videos. He shoots for a lot of events, so like music, I can't announce this yet. Some music people are going to be recognized, just put it that way. And so Frank had to go track down all these different people separately and take their photos and do that. So it's usually more like there's this story, and you'll see all the stories, and Frank's doing those things. For the big events like the Atkinson Lecture Series, he'll record it. But yeah, I mean, that's his day is primarily a lot of those projects.
And then for the admissions piece of the website, do you know who sort of runs that page and who updates that page?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that Eki does some of it, but I'm not 100% sure. It probably depends on the section you're talking about. And then, it'd be best probably to ask him.
Okay.
Or
Sorry,
maybe
what was-
Ramirez.
Yandel, Eki Yandel.
And then a lot of the website is content that's like flowed together from other sections. So it's not, it may not be apparent that where content lives may not be where he's coming from initially. And admittedly, with 45,000 pages, there's way too much out-of-date content on our website. So, we expect to add this process with a new website that will cull some of that content and pressure more of that.
Well, thank you again so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. And if you have any like follow-up questions or comments or anything, feel free to email us.
Likewise, yeah, if you see something that seems weird, just ask and
Okay.
we'll let us answer the question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's cool that you used to work for ODOT. I worked there for the last 4 summers.
Doing what?
Litter crew,
Mm.
yeah.
So, here in Region 2?
Region 7? I'm
Where?
from the Southern Road. Davis Slope.
3.
3.
Yeah,
I always remember. So, yeah.
cool. And I think Jared,